It's so fascinating how words can use their grip on us. Something that once was capable of exciting people and unifying them around an idea, making them even fight for it, in the course of time becomes irrelevant, a word that people just mention but don't attribute any special meaning to it. Or the concept could even become something people explicitly start despising and develop a strong aversion for. This is a really weird phenomenon. If you think about why this happens, why does, for example, the term democracy not make people have positive associations today? People fought for democracy to become a reality. And if you look back now at how we feel as societies, if you look at our identity, how proud we feel as societies, democracy is not really a term that seems to have the same value to us as it had to prior generations. This is a very weird phenomenon. And this is not only happening in the public sphere, but even if you look at a niche, a knowledge niche, where a small group of researchers develops new terminology and is interested in a very specialized phenomenon that is not of interest to the common people, there you find the phenomenon happening as well. That what once was en vogue and was making people aspire, unifying people, it was exciting to people, loses its grip in course of time. You can say this about empiricism as an approach. And even with integral theory, when I think back, this is my local circle and community that I was paying attention to, certain terminologies that were used in it just lost their grip in course of time. Why does this happen? Did they lose their analytic power? Did they lose their analytic value? It's not so obvious to me. I mean, there are a few things that could be mentioned that seem to happen across all of those domains. The public sphere and the more specialized niches in which we discover knowledge. And one such feature is that terms often become overgeneralized and start to be used in different contexts than were initially intended. And when you do that, of course, you water down the meaning of a term. And you can give it a bad reputation by doing that, by losing the specific meaning of what you mean and associating it with oftentimes very trivial phenomena and even negative phenomena. People start wrongly associating the terms and lose interest in them. Another factor might be that these terms might not be of immediate use to us in a given context that we're finding ourselves in. I think we usually, as human beings, don't lose interest in something or someone if we really depend on them. So think of your car breaking down and your mechanic fixing it. You running to the mechanic and the mechanic fixing your car will not ruin the mechanic's reputation in general, as long as you need someone who fixes your car and as long as they do it successfully. So as long as a term serves to really help us in a given situation to navigate and to come up with workable solutions, I think it might retain its reputation. I'm not sure, but something like that seems to happen. And with many terms, including the term democracy, I mean, you don't run to your democracy to solve specific problems for you. It's not something that's in your consciousness. It's something that we assume as a foundational value, but it's not something which seems to be relevant for each and every decision we make in our present-day lives. And particularly, it doesn't really help solving many of the challenges that we're facing. Oftentimes, it might even do the opposite. By including too many voices into the picture, it might make it even more difficult for us to get at what we need in a certain situation. So this might be a factor as well, how terms lose their meaning and become something we don't really not only admire but we wouldn't fight for. And many of these terms people had to fight for them to become social reality in the first place. If people had never identified with them, if people had never believed in them, social reality that is structured around them would never have come into existence. And with many of these terms, it simply is the case that today we would not want to fight for them. We wouldn't want to die for them and defend them. At the time, they were very exciting. And today it's like, oh, Jesus, oh yeah, it's okay. It's a nice idea. Jesus Christ is a nice idea, but you have yours, I have mine. Who cares? This is not the way people looked at Jesus a few hundred years ago. Like, even invoking the name that is sacred had an entire different ritual around it. You were not just allowed to use terms in any way you wanted. You had to use them in very specific and already defined ways. Another way, I guess, in which terms might become watered down and even something that we start rejecting is obviously warfare. It is part of warfare to make the enemy lose sight of the terms that unite you. And that's what usually brings people together in warfare. It's a shared narrative. And the shared narrative is based on shared concepts. It's very much like a shared flag. And if you make people associate the flag with something that's negative, like here in the Balkans, for example, people mostly associate, I'm not sure about the mostly part, I would have to look that up, but when I'm talking to people on the street, significantly more people are skeptical of the term democracy here on the Balkans than in Western Europe. And when you say democracy, what they usually understand is not fairness, it's not an inclusion of many different voices, it's not diversity, but what they understand by the term democracy is that the strongest rules, the strongest gets to have everything. Since there is no power, no regulatory system that transcends all of us and binds all of us, the strongest voice in the game just simply wins it all. And that's what many people associate to be democracy here. It's something very pre-democratic, if you think, and very tribal. But the concept itself has been associated with this kind of tribalism. And maybe because the concept itself was not capable of solving the problem of tribalism on the Balkans. Just by saying we believe in democracy, and just by saying we want democratic principles to be realized, was definitely not enough to realize them, to make them a reality. And I'm not sure we know how to do that. I'm not sure how we know how to actually build democracies or something that resembles the concept in a space which is explicitly political, where political action is the dominating force. This is not just simply a scientific experiment where you have the freedom of setting the boundaries of the experiment and the conditions of the experiment. Social reality is very different. For social reality, you have to fight in very different ways than you have for setting the conditions of a physical experiment. And the reality of the political sphere is just simply that you can't bring something into a reality by just thinking it into a reality. With a scientific experiment, it's pretty easy. Thinking and acting here almost coincide. The moment you think of something, you can build an experiment around it. You can build an environment around it. Thought and practice here are not really separated. While in the political sphere, it seems to me they are severely separated from each other. Just coming up with an idea is not enough to make it real. And you can have even people using good ideas and your ideas for their own political ends to realize other realities than you wanted with these concepts in the first place. So this is another factor. Narrative warfare has always been a part of why terms lose their meaning and lose their grip in course of time. Simply because there, in most cases, always was an enemy looking out for how they can use your flags against you, how they can use your holiest of concepts against yourself, so that you cease to exist as a social entity and become fragmented. I don't see many other ways in which concepts lose their grip. Maybe one other aspect of it is the aspect of novelty. It seems to me that when something is novel, it might even not be that smart, but it carries along this kind of promise nature. It's promising something to people, and it gives people hope. And after a certain point, when people clearly see that a concept does not deliver on the hope that it actually provides, the overall attitude can shift. You can have a tipping point, and the overall attitude might shift to the negative towards a concept. But at the very beginning, it's usually an attitude of hopefulness, very, very similar to religious hopefulness, where you're waiting for the Savior to come, where you're looking into a promised future and hoping for it to become reality. And very different from the religious kind of hopefulness, this form of hopefulness can actually easily break. It can easily be disappointed, and there can be a real tipping point when people just say no. The promise was never delivered. This is just plain ridiculous. We're turning to something different. And even if the concept carried along some meaning, unfortunately that meaning will be swept away as well the moment this tipping point has been arrived for a large enough number of people. Then it's pretty hopeless to try to revive the concept and maybe come up with a new concept that is something entirely different, carries a very different name, and brings something new to the table. This might be the better strategy than trying to revive the old concept. It doesn't seem to work. I think once a community has felt as a community that a concept is dead to it, I'm not sure we can revive concepts without using new concepts. There are basically maybe extensions of the old concept, but it has to give people the felt sense of novelty. If the felt sense of novelty isn't there, it just won't stick. And this is something that's often observable in misinformation and in propaganda, is that the aspect that something, a specific claim, is just new, oftentimes is more convincing than its actual content. If you look at what simply seems to stick with people, is that it's usually not the most refined, the most validated claims that stick with people, but the felt sense that the information that you're given is something that you didn't know before. And it can be purely made up. It really doesn't make much of a difference. But as long as it coheres with your present-day understanding, and particularly if it can catch several anchor points at once, if it can cohere with several other beliefs and maybe even new beliefs that you just acquire at the same time, this overall will be more convincing to people than the most validated idea that is around, that has been validated by multiple disciplines, by multiple generations. The most validated idea doesn't stand a chance against something that comes packaged as new. And this is very easily observable, I believe, in the narrative warfare space. When you look at how people try to convince other people, this is one of the major features. Just say something new, something the listeners didn't know and have to look up in the first place. Usually they won't take the time to look it up. And the fact that it's something new and that they have never heard before is convincing enough for them to give them a sense of, I'm not informed on the issue. This is new information. Since it's new, that person might have spent more time studying this than I have. This is very often a reaction instead of looking it up and seeing what the sources are. And oftentimes the sources are actually invisible and untraceable when it comes to such ideas being smuggled into the public sphere. So it's very interesting. It seems like we as a society can't just simply come up with working concepts and put those in boxes and be sure that those will work forever. We kind of have to reinvent ourselves from generation to generation, because inadvertently those concepts will change and shift in meaning, and we'll have to find ways of reviving them so that they live up to the contextual challenges of the present day, and so that we have the feeling that those concepts are actually contributing to solving the bigger issues that we're facing today. If we feel they're not related at all to solving the big challenges of today, we'll drop those concepts no matter what, no matter how beautiful they are, and no matter how many other generations have believed in them.